Thanks for inviting me into your home, your long-haul truck, RV, camper, taxi, your parents' well-appointed basement with the simulated wood paneling, electric fireplace, and the painting of dogs playing poker, your loft, that greasy spoon just off the interstate, and your cabin in the woods. Welcome to Coast AM. I'm Richard Serrett, sitting in for George Norrie. And tonight, this morning, I'm coming to you from my home studio in Old Thornhill, just north of Toronto. Brr! It's currently minus 25 Celsius in Thornhill. That's minus 13 Fahrenheit. Same deal tomorrow, minus 25. But that's child's play compared to what's happening right now in the northeastern United States. A powerful Arctic blast swept into the northeastern USA today, pushing temperatures to a record low, with New Hampshire's Mount Washington, get this, recording a wind chill of minus 104 degrees Fahrenheit. You heard me correctly, minus 104 degrees Fahrenheit. That's minus 75 Celsius. A National Weather Service advisory said the mass of frigid air would keep temperatures at life-endangering levels through Saturday, warning of extremely dangerous conditions from the short-lived blast. Say, what's the deal with the Chinese spy balloons? Now there are two of them, apparently. The first one that drifted over a nuclear missile base in Montana. Now there's a second one coming up from Latin America. I don't understand why they don't shoot these things down. Could these things be some kind of, a trial balloon testing for a future EMP attack? The first one was floating through Canada for days. And again, I don't understand. If these were Russian balloons, they would have been taken out immediately. It's very strange. And we're to believe they can't be shot down because of a fear that the debris field could cause injury on the ground, or that they have maneuverability and it makes it tricky to intercept them. I don't know. I'm a simple man. None of this makes sense to me. If there are two, will there be 3, 4, 10, 100? And if you can't shoot down an object from a hostile power flying through sensitive airspace, when is it okay? Micah Dank returns to Coast in the first half. Micah is a terrific writer. He's his Into the Rabbit Hole series of fiction books. Well, let me give you the synopsis. Graham, a functioning alcoholic and Harvard medical student and the protagonist of Into the Rabbit Hole, stumbles across a puzzling communication from his deceased Navy SEAL brother. Graham must work to unravel a litany of secrets sobering in their implications, not only for himself, but for the past 12,000 years of human history and the secrets of the universe. Wow. Michael will also explain astrotheology and discuss how the biblical narrative mirrors the yearly journey of the sun through the zodiac, which is not necessarily to suggest that the Bible is mere allegory. I don't believe that. I believe the narrative is literally true, but it could also at the same time mirror what is happening in the heavens. And Micah will also discuss his belief in the non-duality of God, that God is everything and everything is God. And of course, there are more than 1 billion people on earth who believe that. It's pantheism. It's also Hinduism. We'll also get into his astrological projection that a stock market crash will occur in Libra. So that would be September, October. Well, it's Friday. That means, of course, open lines. And maybe some of you are tracking those Chinese surveillance balloons. Maybe some of you have seen it, or them, as the case may be, since there are now two. What do you think they are? Of course, my 2 standing guardrails for open lines: no politics and no COVID. I mean, I talk about those things elsewhere, in depth and at length, but not here. Welcome to the Audio Imaginarium. Come on in, weary traveler, hang your cloak on a peg, grab a stool, and come warm yourself by the fire. There are stories to be told, and you are among friends. I'm Richard Serrett, sitting in for George Norrie, and this is Coast to Coast AM. Why don't you stay a while? Micah T. Dank was born in 1983 in Oceanside, New York, and from a young age, he wanted to be a writer. Coming from a family of writers, his father was a producer and a radio news editor at CBS News in Manhattan, and his grandfather was a producer at CBS News. Micah was an actor in high school and became interested in writing from his 12th grade English teacher, Russell Reed. From there, he majored in English at SUNY Albany and transferred down to CUNY Hunter College in Manhattan to earn his bachelor's degree in language, literature, and criticism. It wasn't until he moved to Boston for a new job that he became interested in all the esoteric sciences, including the astrology and astrotheology prevalent throughout his book series, Into the Rabbit Hole. Micah Dank, welcome back to Coast. How are you?
Richard, it's so very nice to get to talk to you again.
So I gave a little brief synopsis of your Into the Rabbit Hole series of books. Now, where are we at now? Is that volume 9, volume 8? I've lost track.
So it's a series, right? It's a series, and you have to read them in order. And the 8th book just got released.
The 8th?
So,
wow.
Yes. Yeah, the 8th book just got released. Now, I'm going to write a 9th one. I have it all outlined. I just haven't written it yet. But I think I'm going to stop the series after 9 because I think it's a nice round number.
All right. The last time you were on, we talked a little bit about astrotheology. And it's a fascinating area, and you explain it so well. And I want to spend just a little bit of time on that. Again, this idea that in part, the biblical narrative mirrors the journey of the sun through the zodiac.
Yeah.
Can you just explain a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, so it's Joseph Campbell calls it the hero's journey. So basically, you have 12 zodiac signs, and each one of them tells a story. And based on certain keywords that make sense with the sign, for example, Aries, the ram, so you have lamb, ram, shepherd, ram's horn, for example. Taurus would be the bull, the calf, the cow being the female bull. There's just keywords in all of them. And what you do is you go through the 12 signs, and you find all these keywords that attach. Gemini would be the twins or the brothers. You find these keywords, and what you'll find is they're usually lumped together. For example, when they're asking for sacrifice in the Old Testament, they'll talk about things like, give me a lamb or a ram, give me a calf, and give me a goat. Well, the lamb is Aries, the goat is Capricorn, and the calf or the bull is Taurus. So you'll find that they make patterns through the zodiac, and more often than not, they're grouped together. And that's what I basically do, is I find these groupings together, and I put them together, and I put them on my YouTube channel, and I do interviews with them.
So is it your belief, Micah, that the Bible is strictly allegory, that it's that the life of Jesus is actually just the story of the sun traveling through the zodiac? Or is it that it's both? In other words, the biblical narrative is true, and it also at the same time mirrors, almost miraculously, mirrors the sun's journey through the zodiac.
Well, when I talk about it, the Bible is made up of a bunch of holy sciences. The sciences are metaphysical, or metaphysics, astrological, that's what I basically talk about. It's also anatomical, it's alchemical, it's spiritual, it's esoteric, it's mythology, it's a gematria, it's an etymology, it's a numerology book. There's 10 holy sciences in them. I've been studying the astrology one for about 11 years now, and I think that's what it is. Now, in a perfect world, I would think that everything would line up correctly, and it would be as above, so below. However, I have found these astrological codes in not just the Bible, but I found it in, at this point, 3 different Sumerian texts, the Babylonian and Enuma Elish. I found it in the Quran, the Book of the Dead, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. And it seems like it's the code that is prevalent through all the ancient holy texts. Any text that we deem holy or ancient, it seems like it's the same code. So I don't know, honestly, if it would be possible for it to be a literal story or a literal manifestation, because I would think that it would have to be one from the previous stories as well. You know, it would be very interesting if it was just the Holy Bible.
Can you find can you find this same allegory playing out in works of fiction, like, I don't know, Moby Dick?
You know, I haven't really applied it to that, to be honest with you. What I've noticed so far is that it seems like it is just in the text that we designate as holy for some reason, but I'm sure there are. The mythology of the, what do you call them? The fairy tales, they play out heavily in that sense, in the astrological sense.
Right. So why do you think they're there? Why do you think these? Why do you think this allegory is in these holy texts? What do you think it's trying to tell us, or they're trying to tell us?
I think, for example, what it does is it shows patterns in the zodiac. Certain stars show patterns. Like when they're talking about the donkey, for example, the donkey in astrology is a Celis Borealis, which is a star that's in Cancer. And what I do think is that basically the reason that it outlines this is because we take for granted, for example, that we have like calendars, watches, weathermen, smart watches now. The ancients didn't have any of that. They had basically sundials. And in the Bible, they worked on dream interpretations for harvest. So they had to know things. They had to know that when you see Taurus, the bull, in the sky, you have to put the plow on the bull so that you can plant. It's as above, so below. And at least the astrological aspect of the Bible shows that way of reading it is just an encoded form of almanac, and it was the knowledge of staying alive, which is the most important thing. See, the way it was is the ancients would look at the stars, and they would see the movement of the stars, and they would make up stories about them, and then eventually pass them down to their children, and then to their children, and eventually they learned how to write, and they wrote it down first on clay tablets, then on parchment, and then it evolved from Sumerian to Babylonian to Egyptian to Judaism to the Christians, and then down to the Muslims and the Quran. And that's basically the astrotheological way of looking at things. That's what it describes.
But you believe, for example, in the case of the Bible, because that's my frame of reference, that both could be true, right? That it is an allegory, but it is also truth, because, you know, parts of the Bible are historical, parts of the Bible, I believe, are literal, parts of the Bible, of course, are poetry, and parts are allegory, but not to say that everything is allegory.
I mean, that's really up for debate, to be honest. I wouldn't always make that claim, to be honest. I'm not really in the claim of, like, disproving something. I'm just kind of just showing what I find as far as it is. That's why I wrote the book series. Because when you broach this topic, it can be very off-putting for people. So what I've done is I've wrapped it. It's basically a Da Vinci Code meets 1984 type series, where I explain all the information that I found.
Right. Just sticking with astrology for a moment, because I know on a recent YouTube video, you were predicting a stock market crash in Libra, meaning September, October of this year?
Yeah, I thought it was going to be this year until I found an additional pattern. So they always crash the stock market in Libra. So we know, for example, that BlackRock, the company, has an AI program called Aladdin. And what this program does is it's such a sophisticated AI system that it literally, it doesn't predict market trends, it generates them at that level. So if you look at previous stock market crashes, right, the panic of 1907 was in October 1907. The Wall Street crash of 1929 was October 24th, 1929, which is the handover date from Libra to Scorpio. Black Monday, October 19th, 1987. Friday the 14th mini crash was October 13th, 1989. The stock market downturn of 2002 was October 9th, 2002. And 10% in most of the world's indices dropped October 24th, 2008. So these are all dates in October. These are all dates in Libra. And what you'll find is, with exception of 2008, because that was a stock market crash that was caused by the everyone should own a home and the subprime mortgage. So that was kind of coming on its own. You'll find that the other ones were all generated during Republican presidencies. So you have both in Libra and you have a Republican presidency. These seem to be the two guiding factors that decide when a stock market is going to crash.
And what about planetary conjunctions? I don't know when, like Saturn aligns with, was it Neptune and Pluto? Is that also? I mean, there have been some pretty historical, significant events that have occurred during planetary alignments. I think, for example, the Protestant Reformation occurred during an alignment, and we have a similar planetary alignment. I think it's Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto. I could be wrong about that. Maybe it's Neptune and not Jupiter. But when these planets align, when this conjunction occurs, there can be kind of like a black swan event. Do you see anything like that in our future?
Well, it's absolutely possible, for sure. But to be perfectly honest with you, this is where a lot of people get confused. Well, the work that I do, what I consider myself as an astrotheologist, that's kind of the stories behind the zodiac, the mythology behind it, and how these paint out the hero's journey of the sun going through the 12 signs of the zodiac. What you're talking about is astrology. So you really need an astrologer for that. Now, I know astrology and astrotheology, they sound similar, and to be honest with you, they're cousins in the science field, but they are not one and the same. You can have the knowledge of one and not have the other. And as far as planetary alignments and shifts go, that's something that you would ask an astrologer, to be honest with you.
All right, fair enough. We're going to get into the what you've put together, this PowerPoint presentation, and I saw again on YouTube that has to do with the non-dual nature of God and man. We've just got about a minute and a half here before the break. Just kind of give us a sense of, where we're headed with this before we take the break and come back and discuss further.
Right. So even if you ask the religious, right, if you ask the religious or the people who believe in the Bible is literal, they'll tell you that God is infinite, that God is omnipotent, that God is omniscient. You'll hear all these things, the familiar talking points. And my argument is simply that if God is infinite, nothing exists outside of infinity. And I think that just goes without saying, that if God exists, nothing exists outside of God. So everything in existence would be a part of God. And if you ask, well, how can something inanimate be? How can a pack of gum or a pack of cigarettes be a part of God? It's part of the everything. And then when you start to go into quantum theory and quantum physics, you'll realize that in string theory, you have something, the string theory basically says that everything is made up of tiny little vibrational strings. And based on how they vibrate, it gives its properties, its color, its taste, and this, that, and the other thing. In fact, Thoth, or Hermes Trismegistus, the third Hermetic principle, the Clausium Hermetica, says that everything vibrates, nothing rests. Everything vibrates, everything is energy. So everything is made up of energy. And that's basically what God would be. God would be the collective of the energy. Because
Okay, Mike, I got to jump in here. Pardon the interruption. We're going to head on into the break. Back with more of my conversation with Micah Dank right here on Coast to Coast AM. Sitting in for George Norrie, and say hello on Twitter at Richard Serrett, S-Y, because I love you, R-E-T-T. A mesmerizing piece of footage from Washington State shows several pulsating lights that slowly came together to form a triangle in the night sky. The strange scene was reportedly filmed this past Tuesday evening in the city of Yakima. According to the unnamed witness, the flashing orbs changed color from red to white in close proximity to one another over the course of a little more than a minute. In their video, the pulsating lights can be initially seen low on the horizon before slowly ascending. As the orbs climb higher in the sky, they begin moving closer together until they form a triangle pattern with each point flickering in succession. And you can check out the video and decide for yourself what's going on here. That's in the highlight carousel up at coasttocoastam.com. Back to more of my conversation with Micah Dank right here on Coast to Coast AM. And we are back with Micah Dank, and he is the author of the Into the Rabbit Hole series of books. He talks about astrotheology, and right now we're talking about the non-dual nature of God and man. Now, when you say that God is infinite, and yet this is kind of this paradox, and yet therefore he cannot be outside of the infinite. Let's just drill down a little bit on that, because I mean, what my understanding of what is meant by God is infinite means that he's unlimited, he's unmeasurable, strictly speaking. I mean, unmeasurable could describe properties of other entities beside God. I mean, it's something that can be something that is immeasurable or unmeasurable. Doesn't mean it's necessarily infinite. So if you ask a 10-year-old, for example, the number of, protein links in his own DNA, to a 10-year-old, that's unmeasurable. That doesn't mean his DNA is infinite, right? So God to us is unmeasurable, but go ahead.
I would just say that that could be one way of looking at it. But then here's the thing, though, is that if God is not infinite, then that puts God within creation. Because at the end of the day, if you think you're going to stand in front of God to be judged, then that's a separation from you and God. And if there is a separation from anything, then God cannot be infinite.
No, but separate. I'm saying that, well, yeah, we are separate. We are distinct, right? In the Old Testament, God is making distinctions. He's separating, right? The heavens from the firmament, man from woman. He's making distinctions and separating. What I'm saying is that God is infinite in that he is unmeasurable to us. He is perfection. But we are not. Like, I mean, we share some things in common with God. We are spiritual. We are in his likeness, but we're not God. There is a separation there from my perspective. Anyway, so let's go with your line of thinking then, that if God is infinite, he cannot be outside of creation. Is that the idea?
That's right.
Okay, keep going.
That's 100% correct. We are separate from God in the sense that you have children, right? Hello?
I am, but I'm listening. Sorry,
Okay,
you're cutting out on me. I'm sorry. I apologize.
I'm sorry. So you have children, right? And they are literally...
Yes, I do. Yes, I have two.
They're literally half your DNA. So they are literally a part of you. So they're not separate, but you experience them separate from you, outside yourself. It's the same thing with God. We are all a part of it because it is infinite, but we feel separate because we are basically children of.
Yeah, I'm here. Not hearing Micah.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Hi there. Yeah, we're having some connectivity problems, I think, on my end. I'm having trouble hearing you. Okay, so I have children. They're half of my DNA. You're saying that while they appear to be separate from me, that's an illusion.
Right. Because we know with quantum physics, too, that space and time is an illusion. We also know that the past, the present, and the future is all happening at once. It's one eternal moment. The only reason we can exist is because in our dimension, time moves forward.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, this sounds a lot like Hinduism to me, right? The idea that human beings are actually God and that we're suffering through some type of cosmic amnesia, that we've forgotten that we're all part of the same.
That would make sense because think about it. If God is infinite, if God is everything, if God is infinite, there's nothing for God to do. You can't learn something new because you've created everything. It's all come from your mind. You can't interact with anything. You can't do anything. So the only way to have an experience, if God is everything, is to be birthed on earth with amnesia, not knowing what you are, and basically experiencing everything that the Creator has created. To me, that's the reason. That's the explanation for life. That's why humans exist, is because we are all tethered to the infinite. We are infinite. We're powerful, and we all experience each other outside of it. That's why all the holy texts tell you the kingdom of heaven is inside you. The kingdom of God is inside you. If you take a life, it's as if you've taken the whole world. That God is basically everything. And in Isaiah 45:7, they try and tell you that. In Isaiah 45:7 in the Bible, it says, I, the Lord, create the light and the dark. I create the good and the evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. Because you have to understand is that if you are infinite, you are both the good and the bad. See, what religion does is it tries to separate you from God. And then what it also tries to do is tell you that God is only good. But the idea that evil is not attached or bad is not attached to God doesn't make sense if God is infinite. If God is infinite, God is everything. So when you look at it through that lens, Isaiah 45:7 makes sense.
Well, that's pantheism, though, right? That everything is God and God is everything. That's pantheism.
To an extent, yeah, to an extent.
But doesn't God also make distinctions? I mean, in Genesis, he's very clearly separating and making distinctions.
Well, it's an illusion in this dimension. The separation is an illusion.
Okay, well, perhaps, I guess. I mean, I guess that's why we have different religions. We have Hinduism, and we have Christianity. We have Judaism. We have Islam, Buddhism.
Right.
So this is coming more from a I guess Hindu anthropology. Is that where you're sort of
I don't usually spend a lot of time on Eastern philosophy. I'll explain to you why. It's because the astrotheology, the work that I do, all these ancient societies, from the books that I have unraveled this information, which is all on my YouTube channel is Micah Dank Truth Bombs, and I have a playlist called Astrotheology, and in it I have about 35 different episodes that I've recorded where I show you the patterns in the heavens from all these ancient holy texts. Now, these ancient holy texts, the Sumerians, the Babylonians, Egyptians, Jews, Christians, Muslims, all that comes from the northern hemisphere, and that comes from the east. I'm sorry, the west. That comes from the west. So that's usually where I spend most of my time. Eastern philosophy is incredibly deep. It's incredibly robust, but I don't really spend a lot of time there.
So are you basically saying that all the religions are all saying the same thing, but we're just misinterpreting it?
When we first started talking a few years ago, Richard, and I came on your podcast, I was very adamant that the Bible was an astrotheology book, and that was it. I have evolved.
Right, nothing but just allegory and nothing beyond allegory. Right, I remember that.
I have completely evolved since there. Now, I'm not saying there's no wisdom in the Bible if you read it literally. I'm saying is that the ancients didn't read it literally. That's sort of a modern-day thing after Constantine. So that's, yeah.
Are we talking about the Old Testament or the New Testament?
Both. It's interesting, too, because if you think about it, the New Testament, right, was created to fulfill the promise of the Old Testament and to tie up loose ends with sin and all that, right?
Well, there's an old saying that the New Testament is the Old Testament revealed, and the Old Testament is the New. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting if you think about it, because the Old Testament was written by the Jews, and the New Testament could have only be written by the Jews because there was no Christians before Christianity. So the Jewish people wrote the New Testament. Now, why would they write a whole gospel or a whole Bible or a whole set of information pitting itself against what they were teaching? See, it's not as if a new group of people came in and wrote a new thing. These are the same people. The Jews wrote the New Testament too. So why would they come in and write something that basically goes against or pokes holes in their original story? That's the question.
Let me see if I understand what you're saying. You're saying, why would the Christians who were previously Jews, why would the New Testament be written and it contradicts the Old Testament, are you saying?
Well, what I'm saying is that the New Testament could have only been written by the Jews because there were no Christians that wrote the New Testament. These were all Jews.
Right, correct. Okay.
So why would you write something that is going to put yourself at odds with yourself? Does that make sense?
I'm not entirely sure that it does, because there's the central figure of Jesus Christ who arrives on the scene, right?
Right, but he was Jewish.
Yes, he was. Okay. I'm just not sure what your point is.
I just think it's interesting because I don't think that the Egyptians or the Greeks would have written stories and then came out later with stories that contradicted their original stories.
Which stories contradict? I'm not sure where the contradiction is.
Well, in the New Testament, basically, you have, for example, in the Old Testament, you have. So, if I understand this correctly, which I think I do, you have Abraham about to sacrifice Isaac, and he is stopped. And from that point on, suddenly you do not need to sacrifice humans because the sacrifice gets moved to animals. When you get to the New Testament, Jesus dies on the cross and takes everything with him. So now there's no need for sacrifice of animals because he sacrificed himself. Do I have that correct?
Yes. Okay. The new covenant.
Right, exactly. So it's a new covenant. That's what I'm saying. Is
why would the Jews, if they have their entire, not even backstory, but they have basically their history written down, if you want to believe the Bible is historical, they have all their information down. Why would they write something that contradicts it? That's the part that I'm not understanding.
Yeah, I guess I'm not understanding your point where you say it contradicts. I mean, it's a fulfillment of prophecy, primarily, the New Testament, a fulfillment of the Old Testament, the prophecy, whether we're talking about Daniel or Isaiah. Anyway, I don't want to get too far away from your premise regarding the dual nature of God, and what does that mean then for humanity? If we are all God and God, we're all part of the Godhead,
right?
What does that mean? What's the natural extension of that?
It's just understanding your true nature. It's understanding logically, through without faith, but through with logic, that we are infinite, that we are eternal, that we are connected to source, vis-a-vis the pineal gland or whatever you want to call it. But we are connected, and it's just, if people understood that, there'd be less strife in the world, in the sense that everything.
Right. If we understood that we're all one.
Right.
Well, I mean, if we can understand that from, again, because this is the reference that I have, a Christian perspective, is that, we're all brothers in that we are all God's children.
Right. But what does that mean? Because if you're someone's child, that means you're literally a part of them. Your DNA, your makeup. You're not in the image of, or you can be, but you're also connected to.
Yeah, we are children of God, but that doesn't necessarily mean we are God. In the same way that my children are not their father, right? They have similarities with me. They share my DNA, but they're also individuals with free will, and that's the key, right? The free will.
Right. But you're also not claiming to be infinite.
No, because I'm mortal. I'm a mortal man.
Right.
That's true.
Whereas something that's infinite, nothing escapes it.
All right, we're going to roll into the top of the hour here. We're going to open up the phone lines, and can we also get some questions from listeners regarding astrotheology? Would you be good for that as well? And
sure.
Sitting in for George Norrie, what a pleasure to do so. The founder of a top metaverse company says that the fast-moving development of ChatGPT has pushed the timeline for one of his most ambitious and eccentric projects up by a matter of years. In an interview with Motherboard, Somnium Space's Artur Sychov said a user has started to integrate OpenAI's chatbot into his metaverse, creating a virtual assistant that offers a faster pathway for the development of, quote, live forever, quote, mode. Sychov's project to allow people to store the way they talk, move, and sound until after they die, when they can come back from the dead as an online avatar to speak with their relatives. Any of this making sense to you? Sychov, who was inspired to develop Live Forever mode after his father died, first explained the project to Motherboard last April. Back then, he predicted it would be available within 5 years. Now, due to recent advancements in artificial intelligence, he expects it could only take a couple of more years before people can have a conversation with a virtual reality robot without realizing they are not a real person. I'm not sure that's a great idea. However, that's in the news section up at coasttocoastam.com. All right, when we come back, your questions and comments for Micah Dank as we talk astrotheology right here on Coast to Coast AM. And we're back with Micah Dank. Micah, we were, or you wanted to talk about a couple of pivotal dates in history. One of them was 70 A.D. Now, when I hear 70 A.D., I think about the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem by the Romans.
Correct. There was also a very interesting thing that happened. The Gospel of Mark came out in 70 A.D. The Gospel of Mark is the oldest gospel.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what they had is in 100 A.D., 30 years later, they had something called the Synod of Jamnia in Jamnia, Israel, where a bunch of rabbis got together because the Old Testament wasn't canonized at the time. And the books were out of order. For example, the book of Genesis is the first book in the Bible, but it's not even the oldest one. The book of Job is actually the oldest in the Bible by a long shot. And what they did was, in 100 A.D., they tried to put the books in order because people were reading them out of order. There was no order to them. And what they did was they recognized right around the time of the destruction of the Second Temple, they recognized that the Gospel of Mark came out, and they were deliberating what to do with it, whether to put it in the Old Testament, whether to create a New Testament. And it was at this pivotal moment in history that they decided to leave it for the New Testament.
All right. And why is that significant to you?
Well, it's significant. It's significant because, we're told that that the Bible is put together in a specific way, and that it's just significant because if you think about it, the Gospel of Mark had a chance of making it into the Old Testament, which would have unified everything. There would have been no Christianity. There would have been, or it would have been one unified story instead of two separate documents. Two separate testaments, I should say, the Old and the New Testament. So I just find that particular time frame incredibly interesting.
Yeah, I don't understand how the gospel, according to Mark, could have fit into the Old Testament. How would that have?
Honestly, I wasn't there for it, but that's what they were deciding. That's one of the things that they decided at the time.
All right. So the other, 100 A.D. is also when John wrote his gospel, I believe. Yeah,
well, the Gospel of Mark predates everything by about 30 years.
True. Yes, it does. All right. 325 A.D., of course, that's the first ecumenical council of Nicaea.
Right, where they basically put Constantine decided to create everything into literal Christianity. Now, in support of the astrotheology, Constantine, when he died, he had a nephew named Julian the Apostate. And Julian the Apostate, his works still exist today. They survived antiquity. And what you'll find with Julian the Apostate is that he tried to bring everyone back to sun worship, to astrotheology, to that, because before the Council of Nicaea, the early Christians were given the name Heliognostics, and Helios in Greek means sun, and Gnosis means knowers. They were sun knowers. They were sun worshippers. And Julian the Apostate tried to bring it back to that because he was a Heliognostic. In fact, he got an arrow shot in his back from, they call it friendly fire now, but he got an arrow shot in his back from someone from his side during a war. So there was a lot of interesting things going on early on.
All right, let's go to the phones on the wildcard line. Joshua is in Grass Valley, California. Joshua, welcome to Coast. You're on the line with Micah Dank.
Yes, I cannot lie, but since I called and everything I've been listening to, my mind is like spiraling out of control because of all this information. And so I know that he mentioned something previously about us all being one uniform consciousness or something to that effect.
Right.
I'm not sure if I had that wrong.
I think that's a fair representation. Micah, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, the total amount of consciousness in this universe, in this world, in this universe is one. It's all the same consciousness, and we all view them through views of individualism, or the illusion of individualism, through our five senses. That's how we experience the consciousness. Yes.
So then can you relate that to any ideology of the difference between the good and the dark, Satanism versus some other side of the way that we exist, or any ideas of yin yang duality as opposed to that unity, which you would think that we all are one? Why is it that we can't all get along?
Because we have things, people believing. Well, one of the big problems is you have different countries that go to war with each other. You have the perpetual war machine that's out there. You have all the defense contractors and all of them. They're looking to make their money. Ties in with the news, because the news is always pushing new narratives with war. If you look at the history of the United States, in the it's almost been 250 years since we've been a country. In the 250 years, about 242 of them we've been at war in some form or another. And they don't want you to know the statistic.
Okay, but you're describing the problem, not the I guess the cause. I think Josh was asking, so why have we been at war for 242 out of the 250 years? Why are we so divided?
We're so divided because, well, no, that's basically it. It's because of the news. It's because of the difference in views, the difference in opinion. Everyone has a belief in their God, and they kind of push it on each other. And as far as Satanism goes, Satanists don't actually believe in Satan. That's a very big misconception that people have. Satanists don't believe in Satan. So although I am not a religious person, I reject Satanism and Luciferianism for a specific reason. The reason that I reject them, even though it has nothing to do with religion, has to do with the fact that the tenements of Satanism and Luciferianism is instead of the worship of God or the gravitation towards God, it is the complete self-absorption of the self. And I think that people should live for others. So that's why I tend to do that.
All right, Joshua, thank you for that. Let's say hello to Cheryl. She's in Washburn, Missouri. Cheryl, good morning. Welcome to Coast.
Excuse me. Thank you, Richard. Are we like this? Energy is like abstract, like this soul kind of thing. Are we, intangible perception of being? We will expire in our tangible bodies and our being. And when we die, the body's like a soul container for energy. Does God learn something from our life experiences, or does God recapture our energy?
Did you get that, Micah? Does God recapture our energy?
Well, again, it's an illusion of separate. It's the illusion that on earth that we're separate from everything. So there's no recapturing. It's already there. We're just having an experience. It's not like we left God, so we took our energy, because that's all a part of God. It's already here. It's always been here. It's hard to explain to someone how you're infinite before you exist. And then you exist and you're self-aware here through amnesia, and then you pass, and then what happens is when you move on, Earth is a life school, is what it basically is. It's a school where you learn things. It's basically the kind of environment where you learn soul lessons, and one of them is that when you pass, you have to go through a healing process of all the negativity and the damage. Richard, if you believe it literally, right? If you believe the Bible literally,
yes,
you'll know that prior to the creation of humans, you had the angels, right? And they just blew trumpets and they sang God's praises all day, right?
Okay, right.
And then, all right, okay. So that's in a perfect utopia. That's what happens when there's no evil, supposedly. But then what happened? God found the need to create humanity that would have to make these decisions, that have the ability to be evil.
Well, he gave us free will. He gave us free will.
Free will, and he loved us more than he loved them. That's the whole story of the fall of Lucifer.
Okay.
Right.
So
my point is simply this, is that in a perfect utopia, if everyone was singing God's praises, this and that, that's not how things work. The important thing is to come to earth and to learn to choose good over evil, as opposed to only being able to choose good, if that makes any kind of sense.
Well, of course, that's the whole point. That's why when people say, well, why do bad things happen? It's because we have free will. If our children that we have obeyed us, and we made them obey, and they had no choice but to obey us, and they never made mistakes, they wouldn't learn. They wouldn't really love us. I mean, you can't, if you force someone to love you, that's not love. That's not free will, right? That's why some people choose to turn away from God.
Is that what you're saying that the angels were? The angels were forced to love God?
I'm talking about mankind. I don't know. I don't know what that deal was with when God created angels.
Right.
All right. Let's say hi to James is in Washington State. James, welcome to Coast.
Hi, how's it going? So I had a comment and then I had a question for Mike. So what I've learned is that we are all given a sliver of light from God since birth that's called our soul. Also, innocent, clear slate. And life as a righteous believer in God is all about trying our best to be valiant and act more like Christ Jesus. So from the old covenant to the new covenant, God's trying to teach mankind to be more like Jesus. And so that way we can grow and wax our soul and to a level that's respected and loved by the Holy Trinity. So Jesus is the only spiritual power ordained by God to judge the quick and the dead, according to the Bible. And then that was my comment. And I also believe that we're not God. We just have a sliver of God in us. But my question is, do you believe Jesus died for our sins, iniquities, and transgressions planned by the Creator God to create the new covenant and fulfill the real prophecy? And if prayer is the way of communicating with God spiritually and literally? And I'll listen off the air. Thank you.
All right, James. Okay, there's a lot to chew on there, Micah. I don't know where you want to start.
I could start off with the fact that we're not born with the clean slate, because the Catholics will have you believe that we're born through original sin. So we automatically need to get baptized to wash that away. So nobody is actually born with a clean slate. That's not how it works. And as far as I don't believe the Bible is literal. I don't. I believe that some of it was history. It's kind of like in the movies where you say based on a true story, in a sense, because you could take liberties with it. And what I do think is that a lot of the information is true. There's a lot of stuff that happened at the past that they talk about at that particular time. To me, it's the sense kind of like when you read the Odyssey and the Iliad, you wouldn't take that literally. And I think that the Bible kind of falls into a similar trap where it's this revered book that people are taking literally, but it shouldn't be.
Do you believe that Jesus was an actual historical figure, that he actually existed?
I'm actually torn on that, to be honest. I do believe that there was that he could have been based on someone, but I don't know if Yeshua ben Yosef or Yeshua ben Pandera was a real thing, a real person.
All right. We're going to roll into the bottom of the hour. We'll get to more calls right here on Coast to Coast AM. Don't go away. And we're back with Micah Dank, author of the Into the Rabbit Hole series of books. And the YouTube channel is Micah Dank Truth Bombs. Micah, before we get back to the calls, you were asking me about holy angels, because we were talking about free will and mankind. And I wasn't really sure how to answer that because, whether angels have free will. So I went to a website called Got Questions, Your Questions, Biblical Answers. It's called gotquestions.org. Here's what they write about holy angels. Holy angels have a free will, but the Bible makes it clear they do not sin in their service to God. The Apostle John, in describing the eternal state, wrote that there will be no mourning, crying, or pain in that place and time, and anyone who does evil will not be permitted to enter the city of God. The angels who are present in that holy city are therefore sinless. So humans have free will, but we struggle with sin because that's human nature. We've been corrupted by sin. But angels, again, they are without a sinful nature. So that's what
you'd have to explain how Lucifer had free will to basically rebel against God. So
because he had free will, right?
Because he had free will, so the angels must have had free will. So free will must have existed within the angels as well too. So it's not an original concept for humanity.
Okay, fair enough. It's not a unique concept. But what's different is, as I was reading here, angels are without a sinful nature. We have a sinful nature according to the Bible, according to Christian doctrine, because we were corrupted by sin. So it's harder for us to do it's harder for us to do good than to be bad. All right, okay. Did you want to add anything further to that, or we'll go to the calls?
No, we could take some more calls. That's fine.
All right. Let's see. Melissa is in Bristol, Virginia. Melissa, welcome to Coast.
Hello.
Hi there.
Can you hear me? Oh,
I can, yes.
Well, I just want to address some of the things that the speaker said.
Micah, yes.
Micah, okay. I just wanted to address, I don't really know where to start, but you were mentioning that that it was all Jews that wrote the Bible, when actually it was Luke that wrote the book of Luke and Mark. And also, I'm very familiar with what he's saying because I'm a Christian now, but there was a time in my life whenever I was into witchcraft. And I know the doctrine of this, that Jesus, that God created evil, and Jesus and Satan are kind of one and the same, because that's what the Mormons teach if you get into their philosophy. But we are not, even though God created us all, we are not all God's children, because the Bible says that God's children love Jesus, and that's in John 8:2, believe he's the Savior, 1 John 5:1, and it says, to all who receive him and believe in his name, he gave the right to become his children. So, and that's in John 1:12 through 13. So those that are in rebellion against God are not his children. They can become, if they repent and follow God. But no, we're not all God's children. And what that lady said earlier about, well, there's 40 authors of the Bible, roughly, over a span of 1,500 years, and all the 66 books of the Bible agree with each other. So, I mean, this word is true. And I can tell you from somebody who's been on both ends of the spectrum, who has questioned, we all have questions. And there was a time whenever I thought, well, what if this religion's right? What if that religion is right? But it's not about religion. It's about knowing Jesus Christ and knowing his word. But the Bible says it's appointed to men once to die, and after this comes the judgment. There is no recycling back. It's heaven or hell. And I just wanted to address that to you.
Okay, Melissa, thank you for that. Micah, did you want to respond?
Not particularly, no. I mean, I appreciate the comments, I really do, and I'm very familiar with that level of thinking. I think we were talking about why things are so divisive. This is a perfect example of why things are so divisive. It's because it's an us versus them mentality, and the Muslims have it, the Jews have it, the Christians have it, and it transmits into nationalism too. So that's part of the problem.
All right. Melissa, thank you for the call. West of the Rockies, Charles is in Sebastopol, California. Charles, good morning. Welcome.
Hi there, Richard and Micah. By the way, before I dive into my thought, I'm actually using one of the chat bots to write an article about AI, using the AI to actually write the article. That's how far these things have gone.
Wow.
So I don't know if this.
Do you think that's a good thing?
I'm sorry.
Sorry to digress, because I don't know a lot about this chatbot. But so the AI is helping you write the article? Is that the idea?
It is writing the article. I just steer it in the right direction, and it writes it itself. There's many of these, by the way. Everybody's gotten fixated on this one particular chatbot. This is not new. This happens to get some publicity. But there's already AI engines that will paint, draw pictures, create videos, create virtual avatars with their own speaking style. You can give them personalities. I mean, it's gone way beyond what the local folks at the moment seem to be looking at.
That's true. My son uses AI to create thumbnails for YouTube videos, and I guess it's a quick shortcut to do it. And some of the results are interesting, but I mean, what does that mean in terms of? Isn't that taking the humanity out of our creativity?
Of course it is. But here's my point: the first layer of humanoids to get ruled out of the system are going to be mid-level management, who are generally overpaid for mostly paper shuffling and kind of doing bureaucratic tasks. Many corporations are already laying people off as it is. I think this is now going to accelerate this. A lot of positions are going to disappear because there's no need for them. And if anything, COVID probably amplified that process. But we're going to see a big transition happening right around the corner. It may or may not be pleasant for some, but it's inevitable. This is an evolutionary process as I see it.
All right.
But
okay,
anyway,
so go ahead.
Religion in question. So I wanted to ask about the Council of Nicaea, since you tapped on that earlier. And here's what I see. And first of all, I tend to agree that the Bible is really meant as more of a metaphor for lessons to be learned, not so much to be taken literally, word for word, which can be really misleading, and it kind of misses the point of what the Bible's really trying to say if you get fixated on these tiny details. And, of course, it was translated from several different languages, and this is the point I was going to get to. In the Council of Nicaea, starting at 325 AD, the real purpose was Constantine wanted to create a kind of a political document, to unify all the hundreds of different versions of Christianity that existed up to that time. There were lots of different clans and cults, many of which believed in reincarnation, many of which had more Eastern type of religious beliefs than the standard Western does now. I mean, it was really quite a mix of different things. Witchcraft might be part of it, who knows? But what I'm getting at is he saw this as a mechanism to unify his empire and to make it a solid, definable platform to exude this kind of philosophy as a political mechanism to make this empire last, beyond just say a handful of years. He wanted this to be, the next Roman Empire, which it became. It became the Holy Roman Empire. And one last thing, if I may, most of the wars that have been fought, going back to those times and beyond, were based on religion. Whether or not the people who fostered the wars actually believed in the religion or not is questionable. But the leaders who invented these geopolitical intrigues would use the religion to whip up their troops and get the people enthused to say it's because we're defending the fill-in-the-blank version of the Bible or this particular version of God, whatever it is, and they go to battle and fight the other teams that were from a different version of religion. And that's what, the vast majority of this horrible stuff, I mean, the Inquisition and things that surround those fights, when Constantinople was trying to enforce his newly derived version of the Bible, the people who resisted or didn't want to join in, they were meted with horrible, truly horrible, draconian kinds of measures. So, I love the idea of religion being a beautiful thing, but the way that humans have misused it has led to some pretty dark consequences.
All right. Appreciate the call. Good call, Charles. Micah, did you want to respond?
That was pretty on point. The only thing I would say is that it's kind of up in the air whether Constantine physically united everybody or if he was baptized on his deathbed. It's kind of up in the air with that. That's kind of lost in history.
Yeah. I know the other thing is people. Correct. I just wanted to make a point about reincarnation. It's often cited. That at Nicaea they expunged all of the mentions of reincarnation out of the Bible. They never discussed reincarnation at either the first ecumenical council in Nicaea or the second one, which was the first one was 325. I think the second one was 7th or 8th century. Anyway, there was some discussion about pre-existence of the soul. But there was no discussion, and we know this because we have the transcripts from the Council of Nicaea. There was nothing in there about expunging reincarnation. Let's say hi to. Let me just refresh this. Jason is in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. I love to say that, Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Hey, Jason, first time caller. Welcome to Coast.
How's it going?
Very well, thank you.
Pleasure to be on. I just have a question regarding the Satan or Lucifer in regards to God. I was just wondering how that became like a sin, or because he descended upon earth before he rebelled, if I'm correct. But yeah, I was just trying to figure out the connection between rebelling as a sin for his remarks to God and having the people of the world worship him in regards without regards to God.
All right, Micah, did you want to handle that one?
Yeah.
Why did Satan rebel against God, or how did he rebel against God? Is that the question?
So people have this interesting conflation that Satan is Lucifer, Lucifer is Satan. It's not. That's not the case. Satan, in its original form, the Hebrew word is Hashatan. And Hashatan, when you translate it, it literally means adversary. Now, when you get to the New Testament, people call Satan the accuser, okay? But as far as Satan goes, it's basically it's an adversary. So like two competing basketball teams would be Satan. This is a mistranslation. This is just a metaphorical story that has gone too far, that takes away from the original meaning. And as far as Lucifer goes, Lucifer is known as the morning star. And the morning star is actually the planet Venus. And the reason it's called the morning star is because when the sun comes up in the morning, if you watch as it kind of peeks over the horizon a little bit early in the morning, there's a bright pinpoint light that's above it always, every day. And that is the planet Venus. It announces the arrival of God's sun. And from my work, astrotheologically, Lucifer also has a pentagram. Well, what is the pentagram? Well, the pentagram is basically, if you take Lucifer as Venus again, and you take Venus and Earth and circumnavigate it around the sun in a year's time, they almost connected 5 points. You connect it, it becomes the pentagram. These are just metaphors that people have run with and kind of take these characters as literal when they were never meant to be. So that's just.
So you're saying that the pentagram at one time was not necessarily a symbol of evil. It's just been co-opted in a sense.
The original pentagram is astrotheology, but the earliest use of the pentagram was by Christians, because what the pentagram represented initially was the pentagram was a Christian symbol because it represented the 5 points of injury of Jesus. You have the wrists, you have the feet, you have the spear, and you have the crown of thorns. Those are the 5 points. The earliest Christians, when they were known as Helionostics, were aware of this. It has been inverted and perverted, just like most major things in the world have been.
All right, fascinating. Let's say hi to Steve in Louisville, Kentucky. Steve, good morning. Welcome to Coast.
Well, thanks for talking to me. So I haven't heard the beginning of the whole conversation, but I did hear the Micah, I think his name is, talk about why we have two sacrifices. I guess he was talking about we didn't really have two because Abraham was going to sacrifice his son, but he didn't. But the real sacrifice, obviously, was when Jesus sacrificed himself, and it'd be different if Abraham's going to sacrifice somebody like his son. That's different than sacrificing himself. But Jesus sacrificed himself, which is different anyway. Which is to me the real sacrifice, and so it's sort of like one time a little kid, Dad took us to get our shot, and my little sister was crying. She didn't want to get the shot. Well, my dad told the doctor to give me a shot too, just to show, sort of like a sacrifice. You give me a shot, and therefore my little sister would see, okay, it's okay to do, and she did it. The other thing is the comments about why that Genesis was not really written first. It doesn't matter whether it was written first or second or third. It was written, and then when they put it together, they thought, well, it'd be better to move this book there. A lot of great authors, I'm sure, they changed their different chapters in their books once in a while. Now, and then the other comment that Mark should have been part of the Old Testament, I never heard of that.
Nor have I.
But I thought he said one of y'all said Mark should have been in the Old Testament instead of the New Testament.
Well, Micah was saying that when Mark was discovered, the gospel according to Mark was discovered, he says that it was discussed whether it belonged in the Old Testament or the New Testament. Steve, like you, I've never heard that before. I'll have to look into that.
I'll tell you guys exactly where to go. Okay. Both of you. What you do is that is ripped, the Synod of Jamnia, that is ripped directly from the Encyclopedia Britannica. You can open the Encyclopedia Britannica to the Synod, S-Y-N-O-D, of Jamnia, and read all about it if you like it. That's where it comes from.
I shall do. Okay. Thanks for the call, Steve. Micah, thank you for the last 2 hours. I don't know where they went, but they flew by. Again, the YouTube channel, Micah Dank Truth Bombs. And we'll talk again soon, I hope. Thank you so much for this.
Richard, thank you. It's always a pleasure.
All right. When we come back, open lines, no politics, no COVID. I would like to know if anyone out there has seen one of these Chinese surveillance balloons. Apparently there are 2 of them now. I don't know why they're not shooting them out of the sky. Maybe you have some ideas as to what they are and what they're up to. Plus anything else you've seen in the sky. Back with more right here on Coast to Coast. Welcome back. Sitting in for George Norrie. Say hello on Twitter at Richard Serrett. All right, we are about to head into 2 hours, give or take a few minutes, of open lines. And just wanted to give you the latest on the Chinese spy balloon. I should say balloons, because now apparently there are 2, and U.S. authorities say they're closely tracking at least one Chinese airship that was spotted flying over sensitive nuclear sites in Montana. Chinese officials shared regret on Friday and claimed the balloon was conducting meteorological research and had been accidentally blown off course by winds. I guess now there are 2 mistakes. 2 have been blown off course, according to the Chinese. A Pentagon official called the air balloon a clear violation of U.S. sovereignty at a press briefing on Friday and dismissed China's claims that it is not a spy ship. The Pentagon has resisted calls from some lawmakers to shoot the intelligence-gathering airship down. Since revealing it was flying at high altitude above Billings, Montana on Wednesday, officials have given little away about its precise location. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken called off a planned trip to Beijing this weekend as the diplomatic standoff intensified. A Pentagon official said during a briefing on Thursday the balloon, which is roughly the size of 3 large buses, was first sighted over the Aleutian Islands earlier this week. The archipelago of about 300 islands is located between Alaska and Russia and borders the northern edge of the Pacific Ocean and the Bering Sea. The airship then traveled over northern Canada at an altitude well above commercial air traffic. The balloon then headed south and was sighted over the skies of Montana around the city of Billings. Ashley McGowan, who lives in Reed Point, about 60 miles west of Billings, told journalists that she saw a bright white dot in the sky on Wednesday and said she initially wondered if it might be a UFO, space junk, or a comet. She said there were U.S. Air Force jets flying everywhere around the airship. The Pentagon reportedly scrambled fighter jets, including F-22s, to potentially shoot down the balloon if ordered by the White House. All right, we can talk about these mysterious Chinese balloons. If you've seen it, or both of them, or one of them, would love to hear from you. What do you think they're up to? Are they, in fact, meteorological balloons that are just simply off course, as the Chinese government says, or is there something more nefarious afoot? Anything else you've seen in the skies? Would love to hear about that as well. Open lines coming up in mere moments right here on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast to Coast. Richard Serrett sitting in for George Norrie, coming to you live from my home studio in Thornhill, just north of Toronto, and asking about these Chinese surveillance balloons. I believe they're surveillance balloons. I certainly don't for a minute believe the communist Chinese government that these are meteorological balloons that have blown off course, because now there are two of them. These are high-altitude balloons, and they are considered a key delivery platform for secret nuclear strikes on America's electric grid. I know this is something that George Norrie has been very vocal about over many, many years, talking about the need to strengthen our electrical grids from an EMP attack. And the threat of a balloon-launched electromagnetic pulse attack, these have been warned about by Congressional the Congressional EMP Commission and inside the military a number of years ago. Back in 2015, a report from the American Leadership and Policy Foundation, Air Force Major David Stuckenberg, one of the nation's leading EMP experts, wrote extensively about the threat balloons carrying bombs pose to national security. All right, let's go to Billings, Montana, no less, and welcome Jeff on the wildcard line. Jeff, welcome to Coast. How are you?
Hi, thanks for taking my call. Things are kind of crazy around here. They shut down our airspace Wednesday and diverted flights, and they prevented a flight from taking off on time. So it's pretty crazy. Fighter jets landing at the airport and everything. Usually we get the Air National Guard will do stuff, but I think they just have F-18s, but we had the F-22s, which those are the big boys. So lots of stuff going on here.
Did you happen to catch sight of one of these balloons, or the balloon rather?
I think I might have, but I just thought it was like just a weather balloon, and then I get home, it's like, no, this is bigger and higher. So I didn't think it'd be that high up in the air, but with perspective, you think it's closer and that's something small, but it was higher and something a lot larger. And when I heard the news, my thoughts immediately, I'm kind of a World War II buff, and these aren't the first balloons to cross the Pacific and get here. Japan launched probably like 10,000 balloons. Only 300 made it here, but those were loaded with incendiary devices and explosives.
That's right.
Yeah, we don't really like these drifting in our airspace. And if it's China that sent them, they're probably testing us to see, well, how are they going to react to this? And if we're just letting them fly by, it's like, what's to prevent them from putting, the EMP thing or canisters of who knows what on there to just start dropping here. So, yeah, I don't like it in our airspace. And I know our governor's not very happy about it either, because he didn't hear about it until it was already in the middle of our state. And so he's not happy that this is like right over our land here and above. He found out about it right when I was above Billings, and that's the largest city in Montana. And I guess there's a video tonight of somebody catching. I didn't get that good of a look at it because I think the servers were jammed from people looking at it, but it looked like the witness heard some jets flying. This wouldn't have been the balloon because that's drifted. That's long gone. That's drifted somewhere else. But they heard fighter jets and then some sort of explosion, and you can kind of see this trail where it looks like something falling from the sky. So I don't know.
I saw that video. They were claiming this was the balloon, but as you say, no, it had drifted. It was long gone by then.
Yeah. So I'm wondering,
so what
are
was
they
that?
testing some sort of a weapon type delivery system to, if another one comes, were they testing some sort of system to knock it out of the air? This would be a good place to test it if kind of get practice for drills to knock it out, because there's enough blowback from, I know our congressman wasn't happy about it either. So I think if another one of these drifts, they're probably going to take it out.
Well, there's one coming up apparently there's been another one spotted in Latin America that's coming up. So now I don't know, why is it out of the question that they would shoot this thing out of the sky, because it's a balloon. I mean, it's okay. It's the size of 3 buses apparently. This idea that they're concerned, the Pentagon is concerned that the debris field could possibly injure people on the ground. But I mean, when is that a consideration? I mean, you have to be careful, obviously, but when you have one of these vehicles, let's say, with monitoring and surveilling capabilities flying over nuclear bases and so forth, if an airplane were to do that, the Air Force wouldn't hesitate, to first they try to establish radio contact, I suppose, and they would try to escort it out. But if it persisted, they would shoot that thing out of the sky. Why are they so hesitant
so much
to do
open
this?
space in Montana, this would have been the place to do it. I don't know if they can figure out like the wind, because it is really high up there. They can kind of get an estimate on where it would drift. And I don't know if it's possible to get the balloon, put a hole in it so that it loses air. And if it's able to land sort of gently, we could retrieve it and see what all's in somehow get that technology to see what's in it and get more information on any capabilities it might have to have a payload or whatever. We just need to get more information on what this thing is. So I don't know if there's any way to have some sort of controlled landing, just puncture the balloon. It probably would have, who knows, at that atmosphere, it might have just collapsed, and it would have been pretty ruined by the time it got down anyway. So I don't think they could have, but yeah.
I mean, how much damage could even a giant balloon do? I mean, how much damage could it do? I don't know.
Yeah.
And again, you're going to have plenty of time to get out of the way, I would think.
Yeah, it'd be the stuff hanging off of it. The balloon itself that's probably not going to hurt anything. But if it's 2 or 3 school buses worth, it's not like a meteor strike because it's not coming in at like however many miles per hour meteorites come in. It'd just be free falling, and so I really don't see how much damage that could do if it landed like in a neighborhood. But the odds are it's going to land sort of in the middle of nowhere, and so I think the risk. There's probably more risk keeping it up there and just letting it do whatever it's going to do.
All right, Jeff, great call. I appreciate you checking in from Billings, Montana. Thank you. Very insightful. Howard is west of the Rockies in Vancouver, Washington. Howard, welcome to Coast. Good morning.
Richard, I think I saw history repeat itself this afternoon. There was a rather heated press conference between a Pentagon general and the media this afternoon, and they were insisting that he tell them exactly where what position the Chinese balloon was in, and he just flatly refused to tell them. It got rather nasty. Now, whether he may have been unaware of it, but he was repeating an 80-year-old strategy that was used in World War II, the latter part of World War II, when the Japanese started manufacturing the Fugo balloon bombs, and they sent up thousands of these things, as the previous caller was talking about. They were landing all over the western United States, And the strategy that was the War Department used then was to just simply classify the whole thing. They would not allow the media to report any of this. The idea was that they didn't want the enemy to know how effective or accurate their balloons were, and they actually did succeed in creating some damage.
Yes, there were casualties. There were people killed.
Yes, there was a family attending a church picnic. It was I believe it was in the spring of 1945, and they came across one of these things. I believe it was in the Willamette National Forest, and I believe it killed about three. They started messing with this thing. They didn't know what it was. It hadn't been reported, and it detonated. I believe it killed three of them. But I believe that the strategy of just keeping quiet about it, that general, or the Pentagon for that matter, really doesn't know what the Chinese know about they may not know just exactly what the position of their balloon was, and he didn't want to let them know because he knew that if he said it there, they'd hear it. So anyway, I thought that was a rather interesting situation there, how history repeats itself like that.
Indeed. Howard, great call. Thank you for that. That makes a certain amount of sense, although I don't know the technology that the Japanese had, whether they were just sending these over and whether they had any way of tracking where they were once they were in the United States, or whether they were basically sort of working blind. Whereas here, obviously, these surveillance balloons are there to specifically surveil, I believe, and they would know, the communist Chinese, where these balloons are within the United States. All right, let's say hi to Tony is in Pittsburgh this morning. Tony, welcome to Coast. How are you?
How you doing, Richard?
I'm well, thank you.
Hey, the reason I originally called was for your other guest, and I understand he's not on the air. And I just want to say, in 2020, I died. I made it to heaven. And according to heaven, 75 to 80% of the Bible is not accurate. That they changed a lot in the Bible when they were rewriting it. And it was a good 300 years after Jesus died before they even wrote anything down on him. So, like, Jesus walked on water, but he never actually walked on water. And you can check with heaven on that if you could reach heaven. But
well, I guess we would have to take your word for it. But
and as far as Lucifer and the Bible goes, Revelation, written by John of Patmos, was not under the influence of God or divine revelation. He was under the influence of Lucifer when he wrote that.
Well, that's an interesting take. I don't happen to agree with that, however.
If you go under Barry Strom, Strohm, George talked to him before about channeling, and he channels Jesus and historical figures and angels and all that stuff. So just something you look under at your own leisure when you get a chance. But now, as far as weather balloons, shoot the suckers down. If they're just weather balloons, Chinese ain't going to care. So just shoot the suckers down.
All right.
If it's an actual spy satellite kind of thing, then they're going to have a problem with that. So I still say shoot them down.
I would agree with you. Tony, thank you for the call. Particularly if, and, not to instill or to incite fear, but if these are in fact trial balloons, if I can use that term, for a future balloon-launched electromagnetic pulse attack, because you would be able to, apparently, you can, they are designed, these high-altitude balloons, they're designed, created to carry payload options. That would be absolutely catastrophic. Were these high-altitude nuclear blasts to create an EMP event, knocking out the grid? That's lights out, not just for a week or two. It could be months and months before the grid was brought back online. Let's see. Jeffrey's in San Diego. Jeffrey, we're going to have to make this a quick one as we approach the bottom of the hour. How are you? Welcome to Coast.
Hi. The first thing that I thought was, and nobody mentioned it, was it definitely it could be carrying an EMP or whatever. That's why they didn't want to shoot it down, because or any kind of messing with it, because who knows if there's a test or that was the payload right there. And the thing is that the other thing is with the guest last time about all one is that I picked up a model from Marshall Rosenberg, a guy that was a psychologist for 25 years and picked up an empathic communication, which he went between nations, Israel and the other one, all humans are the same regardless of the religion. We just want a please and a thank you, and it's all needs that are unmet, and the compassionate communication is getting to that foundation of how we can all come together.
All right, yes, we got to come together. I agree, Jeffrey. No argument there. All right, let's head on into the break with Always Easy on Your Own, Juno Award-winning band from Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island. Back with more of your calls right here on Coast to Coast AM. I'm reading here from the Washington Examiner. EMP experts have warned that China, North Korea, Russia, and Iran have programs to hit the U.S. grid with electromagnetic pulse weapons that would cut the cord for a year or longer. A congressional report has warned that a blackout that long could result in millions of deaths. I mentioned, I believe his name was Major General Stuckenberg. Stuckenberg cited the research of the late Peter Pry, who headed a congressional commission on EMP and reported on the potential of a balloon-launched attack. He wrote in the report, Peter Pry, a former CIA analyst and member of the Congressional Commission to assess the threat to the United States from EMP attacks, stated, "Imagine the consequences of a balloon EMP attack that damages and destroys electronic systems at the speed of light within an EMP field with a radius of hundreds of kilometers. The eastern grid generates 75% of U.S. electricity and supports most of the population." Pry also notes, virtually any nuke detonated anywhere over the eastern grid will collapse the entire eastern grid, not just the area within the EMP field, because of cascading failures that will ripple outward. Stuckenberg concluded in his paper, in the case of EMP, the consequences of a failure to anticipate all delivery modes within the reach of an imaginative enemy could be immediate and widespread. As guardians of our nation's future, planners must leave no stone unturned in the effort to deprive America's enemies of low-cost, low-tech, high-consequence military operations. China has said its balloon flying over Montana is safe and not a threat. The Pentagon has rebuffed calls to shoot it down because it could be a safety issue to those below it. All right, let's say hi to Chris on the wildcard line in Canton, Ohio this morning. Hey, Chris, welcome aboard.
I want to put a shout out. Happy birthday to Billy Mummy today. His birthday turned 69.
Lost in space. Wonderful. Thank you.
Also, about this balloon. Now, there's several theories I have, about three of them. One, of course, if you go back in history and follow it, you have the Trojan horse, which this very well could be. Now, what they might be doing also is making this a dry run so the next balloon will be ignored. The Pentagon not wanting to shoot it down makes me very suspicious. If the Pentagon has intelligence that believes that they have a virus and that thing could drop, or if it's shot down, then this could be worse than COVID-19. Also, they can shoot this thing down once it hits the Atlantic Ocean, because if it's up there at 60,000 feet, I believe it's in a jet stream. And if it is, it's traveling at 200 miles an hour. And also, we can't manufacture transformers fast enough if there is an EMP to it. So it could be a dry run. We should pressure those in South America to shoot it down over there and see what they could find out. Because either way, I don't believe that it's just a weather balloon. And the jet stream, like I say, it don't take any sophisticated program. Once you put a balloon up in the jet stream, it's coming over us or wherever that jet stream's going. So that's what I want to say.
All right, Chris. No, it is not. It is not. Chris, great call nonetheless. Thank you so much. Eugene is in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. Eugene, welcome to Coast.
Yes. I'd like to make an analogy of back when I was in Vietnam on a huge base in Phuc Vinh, just about 35 miles northwest of Saigon on the Cambodian border. All of a sudden, all the hundreds of working Vietnamese people on the base, when they would bring them in the gates, appeared to be marching the same steps. And we watched them for weeks, and we finally came to the conclusion that they were pacing off every square inch of that base. And it wasn't long before that base was hit by the first and biggest rocket attack that I think ever took place in Vietnam. At least at that time, it had never even been heard of. So I'm thinking that they're doing some testing of what we're going to do about this and how they can find out what they need to know to put an attack on us. That's what I got.
Right. Trial balloons, in other words.
Yes. Yes.
So do we shoot them down? Do we blow them out of the sky?
Well, I think that they could. I don't know how high an airplane goes. I don't know if you have to get into special airplanes or something, but maybe they could take a C-5 or something up there with huge nets and push them out the back of them and drop them onto the cargo nets onto the thing and give it enough weight to bring it down slowly.
Oh, there's an idea, if that's possible. Yeah. Eugene, great call. Thank you for that. Let's say hi to Tom is in Riverside, California. Tom, go ahead. Welcome to Coast. Hello, Tom. Tom going once, going twice. He's gone. James is in Las Vegas. James, welcome.
Hello?
Hi there. You're on the air. Go ahead.
Hi. I was calling about a few things. First of all, about these things that are running around in the sky. I saw one of these in Las Vegas last night.
You saw a surveillance balloon?
Yeah, it was something. So okay. I need to explain. I really need to explain who I am a little bit. But some of the things in the sky that we're seeing are not stars in the first place. Some of these are government machines, and they're placed in certain places to look like stars. Other things are from antediluvian races from before the flood, and it's technology from the fallen angels. And, I mean, I watched one of these things move last night, about 2 or 3 feet in the sky. It moved.
Okay, so we're not talking about the surveillance balloons now. We're talking about...
Well, what I'm saying is these surveillance balloons might not even be what they're telling you. These could be ancient lost technology from before the flood in Atlantis, and they're just telling you they're Chinese drones, and they're not even Chinese drones. They don't know what the hell they are.
Well, they're not drones. It's pretty clear they're balloons. You can see that with the naked eye.
Well, there's other things up there, too.
I have no doubt. I have no doubt.
Some of them are Elon Musk satellites, and so some of them are machines from before the flood, from the antediluvian races. And the angels controlled all of this.
All right. Antediluvian races. Duly noted, James. I appreciate the call. Jack is it Earth, Texas? Jack?
is Earth, Texas, the home of Dan Blocker of Bonanza Flight.
Ah, yes. All right. First time caller, Jack.
I've got three opinions on these balloons, as they're called. Yes, the obvious fear is an EMP, or it's they're testing our defenses, and also, how would I say this? Using these balloons to pinpoint nuclear strikes for North Korea. Why do it yourself when you can get your minion to do it and he take all the blame? Third, could be a false flag, which would be the obvious with the condition we're in, because we're on a war footing. I told my wife when Germany and us agreed to send tanks to Ukraine that we're at war. It's you could say it's mission creep. I don't think that we're going to be ending up in a nuclear conflagration and destroying the earth. It doesn't talk about that in the Bible, or Notes on a Cosmos, which was a book came out about 20 years ago that has an actual map of the United States and the earth of a greatly altered landscape. Dallas-Fort Worth, east of us, is basically an inland lakes, and the Gulf Coast is gone, including Houston and the oil refineries, and I think all the way going over to New Orleans. There's an interesting map out there. I linked it from RENS.com that shows the nuclear survival currently, and the closest place to me in Earth is southwest in the Big Bend area. So I'd just like your thoughts on that.
Well, are you asking me about the false flag scenario?
Well, and going back to your previous guest and other guests that you had on, George, and that's what this previous week, I do believe we're in the end times, but with all the end times prophecy, starting with Revelation in the Bible, Nostradamus, that sort of thing, in the end, good always wins out over evil. There will be a war between heaven and hell. And the Trinity of good will win in the end. Now, how this plays out, geopolitically right now, I don't know. My opinion is that within the next 3 years, the United States of America will be a non-entity as it relates to geopolitical organizations, as far as the whole global political situation, because
I can certainly see that. I don't know if the time frame is 3 years, but it's certainly heading that way. We are heading to a multipolar world, and we are seeing the emergence of civilizational states, India, Russia, China. There will be others, and as they ascend, the United States will diminish, I suppose, is the word, in power and stature and influence. False flag, I don't know. We'll have to, hard to say. To distract us, there's plenty of things to be, that they might want us to be distracted from. But right now I'm focusing on the idea that these are some sort of a test or a trial balloon for a possible future EMP attack. And quite frankly, that scenario scares the hell out of me. Sam is in Pensacola, Florida. Sam, welcome to Coast.
Hey, how's it going, Richard? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine, Sam.
I just want to address a lot of things the prior guest, kind of his whole belief system was like based off of conflicting ideas within his own belief system. I think you picked up on a lot of that as well, didn't you?
Well, I don't know. I know Micah. He's a pretty thoughtful guy. He's a terrific writer. I mean, I think much of what he's drawing from is basically just sort of Hindu philosophy. That we're all God. Consciousness, it's one consciousness. The separation is an illusion, and so forth. I mean, that's Hinduism.
There's part of God in all of us. but we're not all gods.
I agree.
Unique amongst the interdimensional, however you want to say it. I think it's all a different word. It doesn't say aliens, DMT elves, or whatever. I think it's all a different word for basically avatars and fallen angels and everything. And what I've came to know, like the Bible, I will say this one thing. I've been a Christian as long as I can remember. And I've always said, even at the young age, like 6 or 7, I always thought that, like, wow, this is something that they can make up for population control. But I believe it, and that's what faith is my definition of faith, is believing in something you can't logically explain. But as far as, the book of Jude, I think, is the best example I would give that kind of wraps up everything for everybody. But basically, the Old Testament was all about it's either you're on our side or you're on their side. But I am the Most High God. The only little g's exist because of me, and I will wipe you out. And that's basically what happened. And, that's why he also mentioned the thing about Isaiah and Jacob. Or am I getting that right?
Job, I think.
No,
he mentioned Job being the first book.
At least older. He is probably right about that. That's another thing about the whole order. I've never heard anything about the Mark and the Old Testament, but isn't that the whole point of the chronology or the canonical nature of the entire book? Because the Old Testament, basically, we know from the book of Daniel or whatever, it was consistently added to in a certain order, correct?
Right. It's so much of the Old Testament is prophecy and then fulfilled in the New Testament. So,
exactly.
Yeah, I don't understand how
between what is Malachi, the last book, I think, and but I'm saying those books were actively being written and passed down to the followers of Yahweh, of the Most High God. Back then they didn't have the term Jews or everything. They just had those that followed the Hebrew God. And it's just the whole problem. That's exactly all the older religions in the world, other than Christianity, have a basis of serpent worship. If you really look into it, and if you really look into it, it all goes back to the original sinner, and by that I mean Cain. It all goes to deal with his descendants, the Kenites, Kenites. And if you look at it, throughout the book, the Bible, our Bible, and even extra biblical stuff like the book of Jubilees and the book of Jasher and all kinds of corresponding things, it all kind of has a similar thing to it. Cain wanted to do the opposite of everything he knew that empowered God, and so that's what he did.
Okay, Sam, I got to run because we're heading on into the break here at the top of the hour. Great to hear from you. Thank you for your call. Back to more of your calls right after these on Coast to Coast. Just wanted to share some tweets, and you can say hello at Richard Serrett. Ashley tweets, maybe the balloons aren't for spying. Maybe they're carrying the new super sickness in the form of a fungus. Spreading it in the air nice and slow across the continent would make it more likely to get to the surface safely. Danica tweets, our government needs to get that balloon. Tell China they need to stop kicking their weather balloons over the fence. Are we going to keep them? All right. Let's go to the wild card line. And Eric has been very, very patient waiting in Reno, Nevada. Eric, welcome to Coast.
Thank you very much, Richard. How are you this evening? And first of all, thank you for having me on. My name is Eric Morgado, PhD, doctoral student, University of Arizona Global Campus, also PhD and Masters of Theology in Trinity Theological Seminary of the Bible in Indiana. So I hold 2 PhDs, 2 master's degrees. And my question actually was for Micah Dank. The idea, the concept of being God in the flesh, a misinterpretation of several verses in the Bible. And what has happened is that he's not the only one that holds that belief. We are very familiar with the Hindu religion. Manu is basically another name for Adam. In Egypt, or Mitzrayim, he was known as Atum. In Sumer, Babylon, he was called Anu. Adam has 1,000 names. Nimrod has 1,000 names. Cain had 1,000 names, and what is Eve is known by many names as well. So I am writing a book right now on that and how that etymology began. But what I wanted to point out was that, and I know you study the Bible yourself, and so one of the things I wanted to point out, and by the way, I just want to give a shout out to Dr. Michael Heisner. He has been battling cancer, and wanted to give a shout out to him and his family, and prayers as well that the Lord Jesus Christ has mercy on him. He's been I'm an avid student of him. I'm a colleague of his, and so I just wanted to bring that up and to let his family know that they're listening. I just wanted to ask that the Lord has mercy and strengthens him and his family. But
thank you for that. I didn't know that Michael was sick. He did some wonderful work, or has done some wonderful work on the Book of Enoch.
Yes, the book. Dr. Michael Heiser, my wife actually introduced me to him from actually Coast to Coast. Dan Dillman, who you probably know Dan Dillman. He owns the Ball Theater over there in Hayward, California. I went to school with him, and he was the one who turned me on to George Norrie Coast to Coast, and because of his Montezuma treasure that he has on History Channel. I went to school with him back in '86. And so we're colleagues as well. And
okay, Eric, I want to ask you something because this kind of came out of left field for me,
Sure.
But Micah said that when in and around, I guess, 100 A.D. it was 70 A.D. when the Gospel according to Mark was supposedly written. Micah said that there was that some rabbis thought that it belonged in the Old Testament. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Right. That is an argument, and that is actually an idea and a theory. And there's many theories out there. There's a lot of ideas. There's a lot of literature, antiquity that would actually back that up. However, we have to remember that God Himself. Now, there's a lot. Now, I'm a biblical studies scholar and practitioner, and we have to understand. First, I wanted to just say that the idea that you are God. First of all, Psalm 82 is not saying that you are Elohim that created the heaven and earth. You know why? Because that would violate Ezekiel 28 when God is speaking to Tyrus, and He's typifying Tyrus as whom? He said, because of thy heart is lifted up, thou hast said, I am God, or I God. The word I am, or I am, or the word am is italicized. In the Hebrew, it just says, I, a God, I sit the seat of God in the midst of the seas, and thou art a man and not God. That would violate that reasoning logic altogether. That's the first thing. The second idea is that I have colleagues that I speak to that would allegorize the whole Bible. And when you allegorize or spiritualize every verse in the Bible, what you have done is now you have removed the literal, historical Jesus Christ who came as Elohim in the flesh. John 1:1, John 1:14, and the Word became flesh. You should call His name Emmanuel, translated what? Elohim, or Theos in the flesh, or Sorax. And so what's happened is that when you spiritualize, now Brother Harold Camping, the Family Radio, Chris McCann of E-Bible Fellowship, these are individuals that spiritualize the Bible immensely. They teach that 2033 is the end of the world. That's impossible because they predicted 5 times. Brother Harold Camping predicted in 1977, Reformed Bible Church in Alameda, that the rapture would take place. William Miller before him, 1844, did the same exact thing. So you got to be very careful when you start spiritualizing, and then you have a timeline, a calendar, and you start spiritualizing history. What's happened is that when you start this is what's happening with people because they don't understand the Bible. They don't understand that Adam was a real person. Because Adam was known in antiquity as Anu. Eve was known as Ishtar.
Yes. Eric, let me ask you the one final question, and then I gotta run. I gotta move to some other callers.
Go ahead.
No, that's okay. No, this is all great stuff, Eric. But let me ask you this:
Great.
Is it fair to say that there is more documented evidence outside of the Bible that Jesus Christ was an actual historical figure than there is that Plato existed?
Let me quote Josephus. Josephus wrote about Christ. Socrates and Plato knew that Christ existed. They know that. Of course they do. Gilead and Homer knew that too. They all knew it. That's why it's written about. But what has happened is that you remember what happened when Christ resurrected. You remember what the soldiers asked. And they were saying, let's say the body was stolen, you see. Yes. And that is still going on to this day. So they want to let people, they want to preach the doctrine. It's called every wind of doctrine by the slate of men, the Bible says, tossed to and fro of every wind of doctrine. And that, the reason why it's wind of doctrine, because first of all, it is a spirit of error. The words spirit and wind are synonymous in the Greek. And so,
all right, Eric, I got to run because I got a lot of calls waiting, but I appreciate you calling in, and you clarified a number of things for me. Thank you so much for that. Let's say hi next to Neil is in Santa Monica, California. Neil, good morning and welcome to Coast.
Hey there. Yeah, this is great that he just mentioned Josephus because I wanted to bring that up myself. Yes, I'm author of the book, The Conscious Planet. And this information, I believe that the Bible has been obfuscated, as Micah said, through 5 translations and multiple authors. What did they say? 40? I forgot what they said, but so the point I'm making is I believe that the Antichrist is animal agriculture, and I totally believe, according to 2 historians, a modern ancient study scholar. And Josephus is the first-century historian, is the most credible historian. According to those historians, Christ was a vegan. Now, because the Bible's been translated and is so 5 times and is so ambiguous, as Micah stated, you cannot take everything literally. But, however, when they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, and when they were referring to Christ, it was translated only once from Hebrew, And in the Dead Sea Scrolls, it identifies Christ as a member of the Essenes, or the Essenes, which were supposed to be the first Christians, Now, this is a quote by Josephus about the Essenes, Quote, they, the Essenes, lived on vegetables that they grew on their own accord and wore such clothing as could only be procured from plants and trees. You never see Christ wearing leather, or you don't see Christ wearing fur ever depicted.
Well, but he ate fish and he ate lamb, according to Luke.
He did not eat fish. That is hyperbole. When they say he ate fish, that is merely hyperbole for abundance. There's no way.
What about lamb? He said he ate lamb in Luke.
He did not eat lamb. When you look at the Last Supper, that there's no meat on that table, and there's no way Christ would eat flesh.
Well, okay, so the book of Luke is wrong, and you're right. I got it. Okay, I understand. Let's move on. Daniel is in, is it Daniel in Panama City? Daniel's in Panama City, yes. Hi there.
Yes. Hi, Richard. Good morning. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Great. Thanks for all the working parts to bring this entertainment out to the radio land people here.
It takes a big team, and we've got a great team here.
Yes, sir, and pulling it all together. Few things on my mind there. With Eric, the last couple of calls ago, I think he sounds like a great guest and a lot on his mind to say, and it's curious. I tuned in with Micah earlier, and was a little disappointed that he plead the fifth on a couple of the suggestions for a reply on something. And there was a good guest on last evening that put together some biblical prophecy. I'd encourage people to look back on that with the Insider or any of the previous episodes. You can reach that. For today, I'm kind of with the train of thought of preserving these balloons they're in the media these days. And with Danica, who's like, this is free stuff. If they're over the fence, it's ours. Not necessarily ours. the professionals want to retrieve these things. And let's be curious here. Hopefully the government we have and intellectuals up there have already corralled it, and they have a safe plan for, hazmat suits, whatever you think, to protect those that are the hands-on. And what technology can this kind of analog little balloon come in and outflank the F-18s and helicopters?
Yeah, it does seem like kind of antiquated technology. I mean, they were using balloons like this at the early days of the Cold War. Well, as someone else pointed out, they were using, the Japanese used them during the Second World War, a delivery system for bombs. But, obviously these are a little bit more sophisticated than that. But they seem like a real throwback to the early days of the Cold War.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting how that can sort of still be valid. I'm not that fluent in the language of all the balloons and historically, which I'm at a deficit, but I think that there's some caution should be taken with being able to retrieve it, or we ought to be able to hook it, maybe safely land it carefully, give it time to wait, almost like it's a UFO. You would, give it a chance to do anything it's going to do and give it enough space. And then, also realize it could be a test to see maybe how we react, what we're going to give away, our tells. It's like a poker game in a way. And that's kind of my take. Try to preserve the technology. Maybe even don't even let China know, or whoever you think it may be, and we don't know for sure all the details. And then let it float away again, and then keep what we have, and then play our hand and see what they say, and then know if they're telling the truth or not. That's kind of my 2 cents. And then something that I had on my mind was about UFOs or things that are flying in our airspace, and sometimes I was outside several moons ago, and I heard overhead. You know how when you hear a jet plane flying over, you hear the sound of it, and it eventually kind of dissipates usually?
Yes.
Well, I heard this go on for so long that began to make me curious. I'm just enjoying a little look at the moon in the evening, and I eventually heard the sound of a jet plane that just didn't go away for long enough that I thought about it. I was like, what is this? I look up, and I see like a convoy of what appeared to be flashing lights of a typical large airliner, 20, 30,000 feet up. But they had already been going for so long. I mean, there must have been in sequence, who knows, a couple of dozen at least or more, all in a row, heading pretty much northwest to southeast across the sky here in the lower tri-state of the United States here in Florida. And I wondered if anybody, the listeners, might know about why there would be a convoy of that many, like cargo or commercial or else airliners. Anybody could speak to that or know?
They weren't lined up.
Why did it go on for so long?
They weren't taxiing. They weren't lined up to land at an airport, were they?
They would have had to have gone off in sequence such that they took off right behind each other or met up as a convoy caravan in the sky. But they would have been lined up enough that they could have landed in subsequently to one another and then gotten off the runway and another one land, but they were right in line, all like symmetrically behind one another too. And so it was curious to me. It's something I remember, and I've thought about it several times. Not that it was necessarily UFOs, because it certainly appeared very characteristic of typical commercial airlines, larger planes, the sound, the altitude, just that many in a row going in the evening and kind of a little bit maybe higher altitude. So, yeah, I don't know why there might be. We're transporting vital things. I don't know, conjecture, but perhaps like moving Fort Knox to another secret location. I don't know. That's a rabbit hole. I don't know.
You could. That is a rabbit hole indeed.
What do you think?
Oh man, I don't have a. When was this again?
This was in early part to middle 1/3 through the year in 2020.
Okay, and is there a military base nearby or?
There are several, but these weren't anywhere close to what you might even say. There's Eglin Air Force Base, there's Tyndall Air Force Base. Eglin's kind of major, and they could do things all around the border, but these were high up, and you see lots of Coast Guard military and training exercises that they have here with helicopters tugging boats around the waterways, intercoastal waterways, and that's very common. This is certainly very definitively different than that.
Yeah, you got me, Daniel. I don't know. Maybe someone listening might have an idea, but unfortunately I can offer no illumination on that one. Thank you for the call. Okay. Here are the Talking Heads and Road to Nowhere. Taking us into the break, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame band formed in New York City featured Scottish-born David Byrne on vocals and guitar. Back with more of your calls when we return on Coast to Coast AM. Carl is on the international line in Kitchener, Ontario. Carl, hello.
God bless you, Richard. I just thought I'd mention, too, I'd be going to California for the luncheon, but I think it's sold out with Pat Boone. I'll make sure I see his movie that's coming out. It might be on now already, The Mulligan. And I wanted to mention the previous guests there. There was a book written, Case for Christ, an atheist lawyer becomes a Christian. It's a good movie, too. And he checked it out himself. His wife was a Christian. He was an atheist, so he had to check it all out. He took his time, talked to all the Bible scholars. And I said, yeah, it's true. It's, all the documentation, too, that they have. I think Micah should read that book.
Yeah, that was Lee Strobel.
Yeah, Lee Strobel, yeah. He wrote another book, too, following this book, Case for Christ. And, yeah, anyways, the Japanese were doing these balloon things. Actually, 5 were shot down by the Royal Canadian Air Force. One landed in Manitoba, another one in Saskatchewan. I guess they wanted to start forest fires, but they never did anything.
Well, they did kill some people on the west coast of the United States. There were some casualties.
They did. Yeah, it landed in a field. They didn't know what it was. They walked up to it and actually examined it, and it blew up. Incendiary device.
Indeed. All right, Carl.
Psychological, I guess. They I don't know what the whole, it's political. Maybe this whole thing with the Chinese.
Well, they're testing something. They're either testing our will, they're testing our defense systems. I should say the United States defense system. Well, ours too. They came across Canada. Well, hopefully we get to the bottom of it soon. Carl, thank you for the call. Johnny is in Lexington, Kentucky. Johnny, good morning. Welcome.
Hey, Richard, and God bless you. I want to make a quick statement here. People make it really hard to really know what the truth is, and for me, the truth is Christ. For the Father has given all things to the Son because he loveth the Son, and it's Christ Jesus. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And the devil is an angel of light. Now, I had an death experience. I had cancer and rose up from my body and experienced beautiful things. But I came back to this earth, and my life was changed by the Holy Word. And let me tell you, make it simple. His yoke is easy, and his burden is light. But you got to be vigilant. Your adversary, the devil, he is like a lion that runneth about. And when you go to the book of Job, Father God, Elohim, whatever you want to call, Father Abba, Yahweh, Jehovah, he said, ask the devil, whence comest thou? And he said, to and fro in the earth. So the very elect is going to be deceived. And we've got a lot of people that's deceiving other people. Just make it simple. Christ is king. His holy blood. I've seen the dark spirit flee people. I've seen him flee by his holy blood. His mighty right hand is true. God bless you, Richard. Thank you.
Thank you, Johnny. Tom is in Riverside, California. Oh, he was on, well, we lost him earlier, but he's back. Tom, thanks for calling back. How are you?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's
I picked
okay.
up the phone, grabbed the phone, hit the, of course, the top.
It happens. You're back anyway, Tom. We're glad to have you.
Okay, I want to say a couple things about the balloon. We might as well throw the balloon. That's the topic for today. And anyway, and I also wanted to mention this guest last night, the Benjamin Barak. According to him, we don't have anything, but, it's over. As far as he was pretty bleak about the whole situation, the prophecy of we're going to be attacked and wiped out. So here, but anyway, moving on beyond that, we got a lot of other problems. We're a fantastic country, and this world is amazing. Everything around you, other than the trees and the grass and so on, is all made by us. We've done that, through God.
Yes, we've harnessed nature. We have harnessed nature. We've mastered nature.
Amazing.
Yes,
and everything's made, and somewhere. And so anyway, this balloon, I think we should be gracious and just let it go on and say, pick that balloon up when it gets out over the ocean, to China, and let it go, because it's already been done. You know, it's amazing. There's NORAD up there, and they can't detect this balloon, and there's more going to the story than we know, obviously. But it doesn't matter. I've read a book, or I've seen a video, The Privileged Planet, and when you look at what the universe is and the millions of years it takes to just get across to another galaxy, you realize that you're over your head, you know. So the thing I say, let's be gracious. You know, China, we got a president, Biden, slapping the Russia Putin in the face, slapping China. Just let it go. Let it go. It's not worth it, you know.
But what if, Tom? But what if this is a test run for launching some sort of an EMP attack?
Well, I'd say they got hyper missiles that can do that very nicely right now. And if it is, who cares? Who cares? I mean, we don't want an EMP attack, but what we should be doing is we should be building our integrated circuit. We should, at a war pace, we should be doing that. We should be going after the cartel in Mexico City, because they're killing a hell of a lot more people than anybody that's in Russia or China has done in the last 5 years. We're not doing anything about it. We got leadership that is no damn good, because they're not doing anything about what is happening to all these people on the streets that are homeless. We've got the capability to do something about it, and our leadership ain't doing about it. And I would elect Trump myself, but that's just a personal thing. It don't depend on that. It depends on us. We are capable of solving our problems, but we're not doing it. We could do something about the EMP attack. We should be doing something about that, hardening the transformers so they can't be attacked, and we should be building them at a war pace. And we're not doing it because we got poor leadership.
Okay, Tom, appreciate the call. Just to be, my understanding is, though, a lot of the ingredients that go into fentanyl and that are pouring over the border from Mexico, those are made in China. Those are manufactured in China, so they are involved to a very high degree. All right, let's say hi to Kevin is in Springfield, Missouri. Hey, Kevin, first-time caller, welcome.
Hello.
Hi there. You made it.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Enjoy the show, all the Coast and Coast shows. Awesome.
Wonderful. What do you want to talk about?
Okay, so just some speculations about the balloon.
Yes.
What you were saying about the magnetic pulse. I think that's a scary possibility. And another thing, to me, I'm hearing Montana, and so I'm thinking there's a lot going on in Montana with the missile base there. I think China's bought land in Montana.
Yes, they have.
And then also, I know Bill Gates is buying up land in the West. And so I just think there's something going on behind the scenes. Not sure exactly what.
Well, there's always something going on behind the scenes, backstage in the global theater, as they say. And I don't know if, lots of people are buying land. Once upon a time, Ted Turner was buying huge tracts of land. Now Bill Gates is buying huge tracts of land. People buy land. Bill Gates is an American citizen, but there are Chinese corporations that are buying, up land close to sensitive, military installations, and I don't think that should be allowed. You can't stop Bill Gates from buying land. He's an American citizen. I don't know why he's buying so much land, but That's allowed. But Kevin, I'm glad you made it. You're a first-time caller. I hope you'll be a second-time caller and a third-time caller. Let's say hi to Valerie's in Millsboro, Delaware. Valerie, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Richard. Thank you for taking my call.
My pleasure.
My comments on the balloon are, one, with all the capacity that we supposedly have for surveillance with NORAD, why wasn't that balloon taken down when it was coming into our airspace over the Aleutians? And if the balloon is really just a weather observation balloon, well, then how come the Chinese didn't alert us and say, hey, one of our balloons went rogue? And we can tell them, yeah, okay, we'll bring it down then, and everything's kosher. We can put it into a shipping container and send it back to them.
Excellent point.
And the other thing is, now, wouldn't it be very interesting if these balloons, the one here over the U.S. and the one down in South America, circumnavigated and then mysteriously came down and landed in China?
Yes, that would be very strange, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, we've got a government that is worse than cowards.
Well, I don't understand why, as you say, they weren't brought down earlier over the Aleutian Islands. I mean, that would have been pretty safe, I would imagine. If they're concerned about a debris field and perhaps causing injury on the ground below, that's a pretty unpopulated area to do it. Valerie, thank you for the call. John is in Wausau, Wisconsin. John, welcome to Coast.
Hello, Richard. I'm switching gears from your previous callers, but my two comments will be brief. First of all, I want to thank you for being transparent. Thank you for your wisdom. You always do a great job hosting the show. I enjoy listening to you. Additionally, I appreciate your humble fatherhood when you talk about your two sons and your ice skating rink. It's just wonderful. So
thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, my final comment, Richard. I am a frustrated classic rocker that for the last 8 years has had a difficult time transitioning to new music since my musical hero, David Bowie, passed away. And I want to thank you for the bumper music you select. Most of it I've never heard of, and I want to thank you for naming the artists and naming the songs. That's how old-time classic rockers like me get nursed into the new age of music. And I want to thank you for all you do and encourage you to keep up the good work.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very kind. You made my evening, my morning. All right. James is in Newport News, Virginia. James, welcome to Coast.
Thanks, Richard. Hey, could the balloon be an early Valentine's balloon present? It's still shaped like a heart, though. Like you might hope it would be.
Somehow, I think not. They could be left. They could be leftover Chinese lanterns from New Year.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, I got a book, Blessed with an Angel and a Rainbow. When I say I have the book, well, the Holy Spirit helped me write the book because I asked the Holy Spirit to help me write it, and I had signs of John 3:16. Like when the book came back, it was 316 pages to print. Over my head, the number, it's assigned by my camera, starts 316 for the author. So it's not. So I'm under the author of the picture, but the true author that I think is the Holy Spirit's above me. I'm just a guy that wrote the book, but I had a lot of help, and then I had some other signs that are in the book, and I have a lot in there about the last how we're supposed to prepare for this time. We're supposed to be, putting on the armor of God, and then that's a lot of this book. It tells you the end of days, and it gives you all the information from the Bible. But I wanted to say, I just want to say something unusual that happened in the Ohio State game versus Georgia. I'm a huge Ohio State fan, and I was very disappointed with the targeting call that they reversed, and I thought that was ridiculous what they did. They cheated Ohio State. But the field goal at the end, if anybody noticed, they put the New York ball on the right side of the camera, somebody spliced it or however they did that, and they show the kick. And with about 7 seconds left, they're all set. The field goal snap back, and the kick goes off with like 3 seconds before the new year ends. And when the ball gets to way to the left of the goalpost, he missed it by a mile, compared to what he normally could kick. It's about a 50-yard field goal. And when it went up, it was just about the length of where the goalpost is, but over to the left. And it was 2 seconds about 1 second then on the time on the right. Now, as soon as the ball hit the ground, You look over to the right, you hit the space bar, and that's boom, New Year's started. So exactly when the game ended and the ball hit the ground, that was New Year's. And just before that, if you notice, when the ball's rising, and all the people in the country are watching that game, a lot of people, as it's rising up over to the left, going way left, it goes right up between a sign that someone's holding up at the top of the next partition up, John 3:16, and it goes right up between the John 3:16 words, and then comes down and ends exactly at 2023. So I think there was a great sign there, something with John 3:16. I'm sure you know that verse. For God so loved the world, He gave His only Son to believe Him when they were.
I remember do you remember the sports fan with the multicolored hair would show up at sporting events, and he would.
I don't think he had the colored hair. It was just someone else, I think, holding it. But it was a big sign, and it went right up between there. I think the Lord took the time to say, "Hey, what's important is not the winner of this game," because I was a big Ohio State fan. And I thought, well, not if it's God involved in this. And I think He's trying to say that right at the end of 2022 and the start of 2023, for whatever reason, He was giving us a huge message. The whole audience is watching that His Son's more important than that football game, and there's something big coming with His Son soon. And I believe that's what that's about. But if you go and you watch the exact camera that's behind the kicker, you'll see the ball go rising way to the left, but go right up between the words of that sign. And that to me is everybody was watching that ball go, and they all saw that sign. And whether they realized it or not, their subconscious soul maybe saw it and said, "Hey, that's a sign that Jesus is coming back." So anyway,
all right.
I appreciate you listening. And if you go up and look at it, you can see it. It's on the YouTube. I'm sure they have it on there.
All right, will do. I'll check that out, James. Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate all your calls. Just a quick note. I'll be back in the air chair tonight. Carl Gallups will be here. He's got a brand new book called The Yeshua Protocol. And William Sheehan, Bigfoot researcher, he's got some wild stories. Not the Bigfoot that you hear about, the gentle giant, the herbivore, the telepathic Bigfoot. This is the Bigfoot, the terror in the woods you don't want to run into, the violent Bigfoot we don't hear too much about. That's tonight on Coast to Coast with yours truly. All right. My thanks to all of you. And again, for George Norrie, George Knapp, Lisa Lyon, Stephanie Smith, Tom Danheiser, Dan Galante, Chris Burrows, Gina Salvati, Michael Cozio, Ryan Stacy, and in Brantford, Ontario, Scott Park. I'm Richard Sarrett. Thank you for your ears and your voices, your beautiful voices. Until tonight, so long for now.